You.
So many windows. I need 3 screens up win.
At least 3.
Share. Okay, just got to do a little bit of chat first, Win, and then I'll sit back and watch your show.
CSS Grid, meet Webflow. The future.
Everybody see my screen okay? Somebody just confirms that for me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Super. Okay, welcome everybody to a slightly different time, but it's not going to be the president before people start trying to get me to change it. So lunchtime session for us in Europe, evening for Win here, who we have to take us through some Power Query, going beyond the basics. Please don't worry though, if you're quite fresh to Power Query, I'm sure you'll still gain something from the session. But it's got to be interesting. Win is very passionate about Power Query, as we all should be. So not much for me to say really before I hand over. I don't want to take up too much of your time. We've only got one upcoming session at the moment, others but December to be confirmed very soon, which is Oakley Turvey, who's on the meetup at the moment. He'll be coming in 2 weeks' time, 2 weeks today. It's Tuesday today, isn't it? Looking at how we can customize Excel to work for us. So rather than using the Excel out the box, different settings, different things we can do to superpower us in Excel, have us cooking on gas, as we like to say. That's pretty much all for me to say. I'll let Win introduce himself and then take us through the session. Any questions or anything you have, if you can put them into the chat window, which is probably pretty active at the moment, and we'll find a logical time to pose those to Win. Otherwise, at the end of the session, there'll be lots of opportunity to ask questions or just have some chat about the session and anything else about Excel we want to chat about, really. So if I can get rid of my screen and ask Win to take over.
Sounds good. Thanks, Alan. Well, thank you to everybody for coming along. So my name is Win Hopkins. I'm based here in Perth, Western Australia, originally from South Wales, a little place called Mumbles. But I moved over to Perth about 15 years ago, and it's a really nice place to live, but you don't care. You want to find out about Power Query. You can find me on LinkedIn and YouTube and Twitter and all those other places as well. I want to find out a little bit about you folks. So there is a website called menti.com, and I'll also chuck a little link into the chat. You can either go on your mobile phone to menti.com, or you can click on that link or type it into a browser. And the code is 7533673 if you go via menti.com. And it's just a little survey that I'll start up in a second. Okay, so let me just start this up and I will present. And the code's at the top of my screen here, 7533673, menti.com. Okay, so you can either jump on with your mobile phone, it'll work happily on that, or just jump on via a browser. And I've just got a couple of questions just so I can judge the audience and work out where to pitch this and what I need to cover off and mention. So hopefully there's a few of you jumping in here. I can see there's 23 or 25 people jumping on. So menti.com. The code's at the top of the screen there. We'll give it another 15 seconds and then I'll just start asking you just a couple of questions. This will only take 2 minutes, just to give a sense of where the audience is at. Okay, we are ticking along. Awesome. Okay, so here we go. What's your experience with Power Query? So where would you rank yourself in terms of Excel Power Query? Don't know what it is, seen it in action, Oh, quite a few regular users. A few had to go once or twice. Okay, cool. Quite a few regular users in there. Excellent. Oh, it's a good old mix of everybody. Okay. So hopefully this session will have something for everybody. There'll be a few little side tips and tricks and little bits of advice from my experience of implementing this. So I actually build Excel and Power BI solutions for clients, and I run Excel and Power BI training here in Perth. So hopefully some of my experience will be displayed as we go through this session. Awesome. Okay. So, we've got even more coming through. Brilliant. So there's a bit of a mix. Right, next little question. When you save your Excel files, where do you save them? And this is the last question. So there's only 2 questions. I'm not going to spend all day asking you guys stuff. Right, so where are we saving them? 9, 10. Okay, so there's a fair few going OneDrive and SharePoint these days. Okay, and some other spots as well. I'm imagining maybe Dropbox and a few other places like that. Okay, but maybe online, maybe somewhere else, maybe a C drive.
Is the C drive other?
I don't know, actually. I'd go network drive for my C, but it's not really a network drive, you're right. So I should have been a bit more specific. I just wanted to give the option of other for just so somebody had something to click if it wasn't one of these. Okay, so lots of OneDrive, not as many SharePoint, okay, and a fair few network. Okay, awesome. Right, so that just will influence a little bit of what I say. But something for everybody here. Okay, so on with the show. Let me just set up a new page and close this down. So what we're going to do, Power Query, for those of you who never used it before or never heard of it or hardly ever seen it, just a quick example, 2 or 3 minutes just to set the scene. Then I'll talk about how we can connect to files on SharePoint and OneDrive with a few tips and tricks. Also how we can consolidate multiple files. So let's say you had a bunch of template files that you sent out to your organization and you want to consolidate them all. We'll do a quick demo of that. And also I'll show you a trick of how you consolidate multiple sheets within a workbook itself. So you might have a sheet per month and you want to consolidate them all into one big table so you can do some nice analysis of it. Okay, so that's the plan. The washing machine is there because I call Power Query the world's best washing machine for dirty data. Okay, it's just awesome for tidying up all that messy, dirty data. Right, where do you find Power Query? Well, it's on the Data, Get Data button in Excel, and you'll also find Power Query in Power BI under the Get Data tab on the home menu. So Power Query exists in both, and that's why it's so useful because you can use it in either topic or section. So here it is, data, get data from file. You can tap into workbooks. You can tap into databases. You can tap into Dynamics and other places and online sources and all sorts of things you can suck data in from. Right, you'd be glad to hear. End of the chat, into the demos. Okay, awesome. We love demos. Right, so I am going to tap into a file. Let me just bring it up here. I'm going to go into this file here, and I'll zoom in later on as well. So I'm going to tap into this finance file, suck the data out, reorganize it a little bit so my reporting is easier. And hey presto, it's refreshable. It's all done. It's really quick. And just introduce Power Query to those of you who've never seen it before. So under data, get data from file, you can just pull it from a workbook. Okay. So I'm just going to tap into a workbook. I'm going to go to that little file there, double click on it. And now Power Query goes into that file and sees what's there, what sheets are there, what tables, what named ranges, and then it'll just give us a little list here. Okay. So there's only one sheet. If there were more sheets, they'd be listed down here. And all I have to do is double click on it to jump into editing mode, right? Into the Power Query editor. So here we are in the Power Query editor, and my data in that sheet, if I do Control Plus, in my Power Query window. I only discovered that tip a few weeks back after 7 years. So, we all learn new things all the time. So yeah, Power Query's been around for 7 years. You know, you're missing out on the good stuff, okay? Right, all I'm going to do is click this use as my header. So I'm going to click this button. It's going to push my header row up, and there we have it. What I have to do is highlight these 2 columns, which is which items, which office ordered, and the number of units, but my dates are going across the screen. That is horrendous for doing analysis, okay? If you've ever tried to load that sort of data into a pivot table, you then have to drag in on some, and it's really annoying. You can't do any decent analysis when you've got the same field going across. So what I've done is highlighted using Control click. Then I right click, and the best thing ever is unpivot other columns. So it's going to flip everything else around apart from the 2 I selected. Ta-da! Beautiful. This is now an awesome column with all my dates in, and a beautiful column with all my units in. And this is perfect for doing analysis, but this isn't a proper date, so I need to change this to a proper date. Okay, so Power Query has now flipped all my data around. As it's sucking in from that file, reorganizing it, making it beautiful for doing some analysis. And every little click I did just gets recorded as a step down the side. Okay, so for those of you who use Power Query a lot, that's all really familiar. For those of you who've never seen it before, hopefully even that little is it that you think, oh, maybe I should find out more about Power Query. So if I call this finance data, what can we do with it? Well, we can close and load it. So we can load this now, and I'll go as a table into a new worksheet and click OK. And my data will now be sucked in, transformed, loaded. Okay, ETL, extract, transform, load. And here's my data all ready for doing a nice pivot table or whatever I need to do off it. Okay, so that's the essence of Power Query. And the beauty of it is this is all refreshable. So if I just right click in this table and say refresh, that little script will run again, data in, update, and any new data that I'd added to that Excel file would now be brought in, transformed, tidied up. All good, okay? So that's the core concept of Power Query. I'll just delete this one for demo purposes. Let me delete that, and I'll delete this sheet, okay? So this little option.
Sorry to interrupt you. You mentioned the shortcut that I think a few people couldn't hear, and they're just asking if you could.
Was that the zoom in shortcut? Oh yeah, Control Shift and the plus key. Or if you've got a number pad, just Control and the plus key to zoom in. Top tip. Stolen off somebody off Twitter. I don't know who it was. I would give them credit for it, but. That's a good one. Okay, right then. So this whole get data from file from workbook is great if you are saving your files on the C drive or on the network. Okay, it works beautifully. However, for those of you saving your files in OneDrive and SharePoint, it's not as easy. In fact, it's painful. At the end, I'll send you a link to vote to make this process easier. They are working on something apparently. But for now, we'll stick with my little recommendations about how to do this, okay? So let's bring up some files that I've got saved in Teams. Okay, I don't know if many are using Teams. If you are, and you save files in Teams, so here we go, I'm in Teams here. If you're saving files in Teams, and here's a list of files here, and if I go into this folder, so this folder is sitting in my Teams window. It's actually SharePoint, okay? Teams is backed by SharePoint, so these files are all actually sitting in SharePoint. In fact, I can even go up here and say, open this folder in SharePoint. So I can go here. So if your files are saved in SharePoint, and to be honest, everything I'm about to explain works exactly the same if the files are saved in OneDrive. Okay, OneDrive for Business, not OneDrive Personal. Just to flag that as well. So here's my same folder, but this is in SharePoint. Right, so I need to grab the data from there. I'm going to do the same exercise, but now grabbing it from here. So how do I do that? Okay. So get data from file, that does not work. There's two ways of doing this. The first way is to go here and say from web. All right, so we go from web because essentially SharePoint is in the cloud and it asks you for a URL. And this is where the fun and games begins. Okay, it's like, what's the URL going to be? How do I find the URL? And you jump in here and you think, oh, is it this URL at the top of the screen? No, what if I do click share and say copy link? Is it that URL? No, right? None of those work. Okay, this is the crazy thing you have to do. Firstly, you have to open this file in Excel desktop. Okay, and I've done this presentation a few times and I'm hoping one day somebody goes, you don't have to do that anymore, right? So please shut out, right? But this is what I'm still having to do. So you open it in Excel. And let me just, as typically happens, my mouse is frozen at that point. So let me just plug in my mouse 1 second. Okay, let me cancel out of here. So here we go. Right, this is the file opened now from SharePoint. Then you go here to File, Info. I know, bear with me. This is what you have to do. Okay, File, Info, and then it's this option here. Okay, copy path. That's what you have to copy. That's the path you need under the info. Okay, so now I can close this file down and I don't even need to save it. Then I go right back to from web into my URL, paste. Okay, and the key thing is this, right? This little bit here, this little web equals 1. That's the bit you have to get rid of. Okay, that little bit there, you've got to zap that. So here we go. I'm going to zap it off with the XLSX on the end. Now, why on earth, how that works, who's meant to tell you that, how are you meant to discover it on your own? Totally agree, ridiculous, right? But that's what you do. Then when you click OK, I'll just let it work. I'm just going to disconnect my mouse again for just 1 second. Bear with me. You do have to then put your credentials in. Okay, so I'm going to go here and connect to my organizational account because I am connecting to SharePoint. I click sign in. You only have to sign in once. Excel will then store your credentials for future refreshes. So it's a bit of a laborious task the very first time you do this. Okay, then it'll ask me to log in. I'm going to jump in here, chuck in my password. Okay, it'll sign me in and then I have to connect. At this point, most people will have given up and walked away and gone too hard, can't do it, right? But bear with it because we're done, right? That's it. Because now from this point forward, we're into exactly the same routine that we were when we tapped into the file on your desktop, okay? So just double clicking on that. We're into the Power Query window. And from this point forward, I can then do all the unpivoting, promoting headers, close and load to, refresh, right? From that point forward, all the same, okay? So that's the from web method. And if you ever want to change where you're getting your file from, you can go to this source step and the full path is here for the whole thing, okay? It's got, whenever there's a space, there's this #20, but that's okay. So there we go. That's the from web method. And I won't even bother keeping that. All okay? Lovely. So what's the other way? So the other way is to go get data from file and from SharePoint folder. Now this works whether you're doing OneDrive for Business or SharePoint. Okay, same thing essentially. So if you go from SharePoint folder, and we're then faced with, what URL do you want? Is it that same thing? No, it's something different. So what is the URL? Well, if I go here, the URL you need is everything up until the word shared. Okay, you do not bring in any of this stuff. That's the bit you need to know. If you bring in all that other stuff, you get yourself in a bit of a circular pickle. It says it can't authenticate and you jump around in circles. So just that little bit there up until the shared starts. Okay, that's the bit you want. So I'm copying that. I'm going back into my Excel. Bring this up. Put that in here. Okay. So there's the full URL. Click OK. Again, we're going into a Microsoft account. This is slightly different. We're using a different connector. So again, we've got to sign in the first time we ever do this. I've cleared out my credentials to show you this happening, but normally this wouldn't pop up. Again, I've just got to jump in with this and put in my password. I got right first time twice. That's a record. Okay, connect. Right. So you've got that folder path. You've put it in. What you'll now get is basically access to a list of all the files that are in that folder. And you just say transform. Okay, so transform. We want to tidy this. We want to pick a particular file. We don't want to combine them all. We just want to pick a particular one. Okay. The problems then begin, right? This is where the awkwardness of this begins. So let me just Control-Shift+ again. Okay, there we go, Control-Shift+. So I think I want this file, finance budget. But hold on, there's another finance budget here, which is in a different folder. And there's another finance budget somewhere else that might be last month's finance budget or last year's, or this shows every single file in every single subfolder in your SharePoint site. And that list can be massive, okay? So this whole process can then be a bit of a pain trying to find which file. That's the hassle with this approach, okay? Now, over on the right, it does have the folder path, but this folder path is only that long, and even this filter box is only that long. You can't resize this filter box to even filter down for the folder you want. You can do a text filter if you want to and filter the way around. One way of doing this is, or my preferred way, is if you find your file, let's say this one, if you click on the row, down the bottom of my screen, it shows me everything in that row. And you can actually see the full folder path down here. So that is the actual one I want. That's the one I've been working on. Whereas the other one is in some random subfolder, the other finance budget file. So that's a way of checking which file it is. You can put a filter on the name and search down, but it is awkward. Right, how do we get into that file? Well, that's the easy bit now. Once you've found the file you want, you just click on this word binary, and that jumps you into that particular file. Now, there's only one sheet in that file, sheet 1. If there was 10 sheets, there'd be 10 rows. If there were 20 sheets, if there were different tables, they'd all be listed here, okay? And all I have to do is go to the one I want, click on this word table. It jumps me into the file, and here we are. We're back where we need to be for doing my unpivoting, my load, close and load, okay? But it's a bit of a hassle, eh? You know, that's painful. And you know, you might be hoping I'm going to show you the real easy way. It doesn't exist, right? That is the real easy way. There's a couple of other things to be aware of. This source file or source step tells you in the formula bar that it's going to this site, the meetup group site. The navigation step tells you it's the finance budget file and the full folder path. And that's great because if you need to change which file it is or change which folder path it is, you can just do it there. Yeah, so that's pretty helpful. Okay, Right, so that's the from SharePoint. There is another way of doing this if you're struggling to find your file, especially if it's embedded in lots of different layers. At this source step, this very first step, you can change .files to .contents. Okay, .contents. And I'll just give it a tick. This gives you a slightly different view, and it gives you a drill down view essentially. So you can start with this shared documents, click on table, and it then shows you the subfolders that are in that document library. So I've got 4 folders. I'm going to click on this one. So this is a folder name, Power Query Demo. I can click on that. It'll take me down into the folders that are in that folder. So we're going down the subfolders. And then here's one, and I can click on that. And I'm into my budgets for consolidating. And there I can see my finance budget. Click on the word binary, and you're in. Yeah. Now I have a major problem with this approach, and that is the steps down the right-hand side that get created. Okay. And I'll show you what I mean now. So with this approach, your source step tells you which site you're going to. Your navigation step tells you which file you're going to. But hold on, I drilled down 3 layers of folders. Where are they? Okay, there's the source step. There's the navigation step. Where's the subfolders I drilled down between? They're hidden away in the advanced editor, which no one ever looks at unless you're a bit of a geek, like, well, lots of us, to be honest. Okay, so you go in here into the advanced editor on the home tab. And I'm not sure if I can, let me go and try and zoom in here. This is where the subfolders are. Okay, shared documents, Power Query Demo, budgets for consolidation. Sorry, my drawing's terrible. Those are the subfolders hidden away inside the query editor. I don't like that. It's really hard for an end user to then pick apart. So not my preferred approach, but can be good for helping people drill down into the folders to find the one they're after. Okay, I'm going to close that one down. All right, we're not going to load that either. So those are the 2 main approaches. So use from web, but you have to download a file to get, and then go to info, copy path to get that link with the web equals 1 on the end. Or you go from SharePoint folder, you pick the path up until the end here. Okay, up until the end here. Don't keep going to shared documents, otherwise it goes horribly wrong. Okay, so don't do that. And then put that in, then you can have to navigate through the different files. So pros and cons of both. Don't know if anybody's got any comments or questions at that point. Any thoughts? Are we all good?
There were quite a few questions, but I think they were dealt with.
Okay.
Just scrolling through them now.
Yeah, no worries. That's okay. While you're waiting, I'm going to try and redo my keyboard for the 4th time. Give me 1 second. Okay, no idea if this is going to work. Nah, the mouse god has played its trick on me today. Okay, anything on there particular, or should we move on?
Christian's got a question.
Oh, API version.
You got it.
14. Oh yeah, I can see that now. So which API version is better to use? Honest answer, I haven't a clue. I do not know. I know that I think there was some issue for a while with the 15 one, but I think from what I'm aware of, all those sorts of things are generally sorted now. I haven't come across an issue. Don't know if anybody else has. So when you connect in, and I'll show you in my next example, the source step has the file path and then a little comma and it says API 16 or API 15. And you could toggle that. And there used to be a bug where it worked if you changed it back to 14 or 15. Is that the one you're thinking of, Christian? It actually works totally differently, you're saying? I'm not sure. I've not tried that out, so I don't know. Sorry. Okay. I might give it a go later. But otherwise, I shall move on to the next example.
There were a couple of questions about the process if it was OneDrive personal.
Doesn't work. From what I'm aware, the sort of the URL, and again, I'm just sort of on the fringe of this. I think the URL isn't like consistent enough to actually use OneDrive personal. I think it's almost like that. You know, there is no, because OneDrive is SharePoint essentially. So just as a word of warning as well, I don't know, you know, people using in organizations, ideally SharePoint is your organization replacement for your network drive. And then OneDrive is your personal folder because it's really hard to get into once you leave the organization and stuff like that as well. It's a bit of a pain. So SharePoint's the way to go. Same sort of experience. Okay. Sorry, go on.
Sorry. Somebody on YouTube asked if you had a cheat sheet on this. I'm assuming you've got the blog post of your win.
Yeah, I'll also share a little link at the end, and there's a whole bunch of little tips, the same sort of thing, going through some of these little tips. And yeah, I've got a YouTube link as well to a similar video showing you how to use that one. Okay, so next one. So that's just tapping into a file. But notice, you know, this from folder, that can actually be pretty cool because we can actually tap into a folder and consolidate all the data in there. So I'm going to do it with this SharePoint folder. You can either do from folder or from SharePoint. So you go from folder if you connect into a network, from SharePoint folder if you go into OneDrive for Business or SharePoint. Okay. So if I go from folder, and the site URL, okay, it's the same one, that meetup group. And actually, I think I can shortcut it by going recent sources because I've already tapped into that SharePoint site. There we go. See, it's just there under recent sources. So I don't even have to paste it in. Double click on that. So I'm going to go and get into the folder that finance budget was in. So again, I don't want to combine stuff here because this is all the files in my folder. I want to go transform data to start with. Then I just need the file, the folder that everything's in. So let me zoom in a second. Sorry, I'm leaning over here, but my keyboard straight in front of me is wireless and it has stopped working just in the nick of time. So I am stretching across a bit. Right, so remember this was the file. So the folder is this one. And I can't expand it, I can't see it. So here's a little trick. Right click, text filter equals. So it'll now filter the column for that value. So it's now going to filter it down. And there's the 3 files that are in that folder. Okay. So these are the 3 files that I want to consolidate together, append them on top of each other, and then load them. So what I'm going to do next, and this is a little tip, you don't have to do this. What I could just do normally is click this little button and it'll start the consolidation process, okay? That combine files icon. But my recommendation, and I'll explain why in a second, is to have this as a starting point and then reference it, okay? So right click, reference. I'll explain why I'm doing this in a second. So this one, I'm just going to call SharePoint folder. Oh, spelt very badly. Okay, and this one will be my consolidation. Okay, and it's this one that I expand out. Okay, so just click on this, and then hopefully it'll just pop it out. Here we go. It'll then ask me, what do I want to consolidate from each file? Well, it's sheet 1 from each file. You have to make this as simple as possible, you need to be consolidating the same sheet name or table name or range name in each file. Okay. So here we go. It's going to whir through. It's going to ask me, which sheet do you actually want to consolidate? Now, there's only one sheet in each file, so it's pretty simple which to pick. This is normally super fast, except for when you're streaming via Zoom and stuff. It always takes a little bit longer because of the bandwidth. There's sheet 1. Okay, I can just double click on it. And now it's going to do some magic and actually consolidate all sheet 1s from every single file, i.e. all 3 files in this folder. And within a few seconds, no copy pasting, not opening the files, just using my folder as a data source, I now have what I need, okay? So here we go. Here's the HR budget. Then here's the ops budget, all appended on top of each other, stacked up. And the more folders I drop in there, the more files I drop in there, the bigger the consolidation just gets. Okay, you just keep refreshing it. Right then, so what I don't want is this heading row every time. So the magical thing is this transform sample file. Okay, this is the key bit. So I go to this transform sample file. Any change I make to this file, those changes get applied to every other file as they get sucked in, which is awesome. Okay, so what I'm going to do is say use first row as headers. Okay, I'm just going to get rid of this change type step because it can catch you out because it hard codes in the dates in my formula, okay, which I don't really want. So I'm going to get rid of that. Then I'm going to highlight the 2 columns. So control click, right click, control click, right click, unpivot other columns, flip everything else around. Beautiful. Call this a date. Call this units. Now, unfortunately, there's no point in me changing the data types here because they get lost when they get consolidated. So if I go to the consolidation step now, because that was the sample file, that was just the one file, you always get this warning because of this change type step. It's looking for column 1 and column 2, but I've flipped everything around. So all you have to do is delete that little step. And now everything is beautifully consolidated. HR, scroll down, operations, finance, everything's been unpivoted and stacked on top of each other using this transform sample file. So any change you make to that gets changed to everyone. I'll then just do Control A to select all. So Control A and go to transform detect data type. It scans through the columns and works out that this is text and that's a date and that's units. And I'll even just grab the first letters before the first space. So I'm going to say transform, extract, text before delimiter. The delimiter is going to be a space. Just put a little space in there and click OK. And it'll just grab the word HR, operations, etc. Okay, beautiful. Okay, nicely tidied up. Anyone's ever done a left function, that's the Power Query version of it. Okay, or mid or text to columns, those sorts of things. Right, I'm good, I can load it. So just going back to this thing, remember I did this helper query, this SharePoint folder. Why did I do that? Well, the reason is this. So if I go to my consolidation, I go to the source step, it's referring to the SharePoint folder. Beautiful. But the other file is this sample file. This is the one you use for the transform sample file. That also refers to the SharePoint folder when that little helper query gets generated automatically. So rather than having to change the location in 2 spots, I can just change this folder here and change to a different group or a different filtered folder I've jumped to, and then it will feed into both those. Otherwise, you have to change them in both spots. For those of you who used Power Query before, you might think, oh, I can just go to data source settings and change it everywhere. Well, not with SharePoint folders, because you just get the site group. That's all you can change. You can't change the subfolders under there. That's why I put in that little helper table. Now, for those of you who are new to Power Query, that might not make much sense, but hopefully those of you who've done this sort of thing might go, oh, okay, yeah, that's sort of, I see why. Okay, all good. So I've now got this consolidated data. Let me call this department as well. Okay, there we go. And I want to close and load to. And this time I'm not going to load to a table. I'm actually going to load it into the data model, okay, into Power Pivot. So the data model is hiding there behind Excel. It's all part of the Excel file. Click OK. So the data model is the one that's capable of holding millions and millions of rows of data. But it's also really nice for doing refreshable pivot table reports. So the data is loading away. It's been pulled down, flipped around, consolidated, stacked on top of each other. Okay. I don't actually want to load that SharePoint folder, so I'll turn that one off in a second. So right click, load to. That doesn't need to go to the data model. That's just my helper. Okay. So that's fine. That's connection only. Lovely. So what I can do now is just go somewhere, insert a pivot table. Okay, this is automatically flagged up here. Use this workbook's data model. Click OK. And here is all the data I need, all the stuff I've just loaded. And I could say, OK, by department, I want to see the number of units by office. And I'll add a little slicer. Okay, so there we go. And then I can turn this into a chart. So pivot chart, templates, one I prepared earlier. Okay, let's just scroll down and pick that one. So there's my nice little pivot chart. And as I toggle between my slicer for hand wash and sanitizer and toilet paper, okay, we can just click between those things. But the cool thing about this is, because it's in SharePoint, anybody you share this file with who's got access to that SharePoint folder can refresh this report. Whereas if it was on your C drive, saved or synced to your C drive, then it's only you that can refresh it. So let me show you what I mean. Let me just minimize this and I will bring up this extra item. So I've got an IT budget, okay? And I'll put that over there and I'll bring up my folder here and I'll pop that over there. Okay, IT budget, drop it in here. So this is dropping it into my SharePoint folder. So there's the IT budget. Right, let's bring back up our Excel file. I just right click in my pivot table and I refresh and now it'll bring in the IT. Okay, off it goes, whirs away, unpivots the data, stacks it all on top of each other, loads it into my data model. It says retrieving data. And now I've got IT added as well. And they're selling, oh, they bought laptops and monitors. So the more files you start dropping in that folder, you just click refresh. That could be a monthly export. You just keep clicking refresh and the folder gets bigger and bigger and you're sucking the data in from that folder every time. Okay, any questions on that bit? So from folder.
There's a couple of questions in the chat, Win.
Okay. So what have we got? Let's go from the bottom up because it's easier. Does it break if files you're combining have slightly different sheet names? Yes, it's a pain. It's not impossible. It's not impossible, but it's a pain. So yeah, you do want the same sheet names. Otherwise, it just gets exponentially harder. Same sheet names or table names or range names, whatever they are that you're consolidating. If they're different every time, then it gets painful. Okay, what else have we got? COVID, it is the COVID panic buying department. That is quite right, Peter, thank you. I thought I'd be topical with my choice of purchased items. Any reason why you don't create a custom column and use excel.workbook? pretty much because I'm lazy and don't want to type formulas in. I like clicking buttons. But you can do that as well. I'm not sure if there's if it's faster, if there's any performance improvement from doing a custom column and it pulling the data out. But I like, okay, the reason I don't do that, and I think I saw Ruth do it, Kerbal, on the Kerbal YouTube channel. The reason I don't like doing it is because of the helper. The helper is really key to this, right? Because you never get it right first time. Power Query, the golden rule of Power Query is you'll never nail it first time. You always have to go back and realize you missed something, or you need to filter something out, or you need to change something. Now, if I go back into this and pop out this little panel on the side, this transform sample file is an absolute godsend. Anything you do to that, I suddenly realize I need to, filter out a particular item or filter on a particular date or do some other stuff. It then gets automatically flows through into that consolidation step, and I don't have to write any code or do anything fancy. Whereas if you use the custom Excel.workbook, you don't get that helper file. Is that okay? What else we got? Any other bits?
There was a question, like going back to the previous one from Christian.
Oh, yeah.
Just asking if you know about a speed difference between your two SharePoint techniques, the from folder,
okay.
from web.
I don't. I haven't really come across any definitive argument on that. I don't know if anybody else has. I know that there's been talk that there's a SharePoint lists connector that's meant to work a bit quicker than the SharePoint folder one and the from web. But to be honest, I've heard other people saying they've had lots of issues with it being slow and stuff from SharePoint folder. Personally, not come across it causing me massive grief. There's workarounds and stuff as well in terms of turning off your privacy levels, preventing previews to load in the background, all those sorts of things, just speed stuff up dramatically. But yeah, I don't know the answer to that. Any others? Can you refresh Power Query in the web version of Excel? No. It's only recently you've been able to do refresh Power Query in the Mac version. They added that about 6 months ago, I think. But not online. No, Excel web, you can't refresh.
There's a new question back at the bottom.
Oh, yeah. My data was spread over different folders. Is there an easy way to consolidate? Easy is a relative term. So one option, okay, is you have a table in your Excel file with a list of all the folders that you want to consolidate. And you can use those as parameters for pulling in the files you need. And it sort of loops around. And maybe the next example I show you will give you some ideas. But I've seen that done where you can have a list of all the folders you want to grab files from. And then you can actually go through that and loop through it and pull all the data in. So maybe the next example will give you a little sense of that looping, how you might go about it. Anything else in there, or should we move on?
So we'll move on, I think, for now.
Cool. Okay. So that's basically covered off my SharePoint stuff. The last one I wanted to cover off was consolidating multiple files. And I actually do it in a brand new file. So I'll go File, New. Okay, so multiple sheets from within a workbook. So here I go. I'm going to go Data, Get Data from File. I'm just going to tap into a workbook on my network drive. It's got 36 sheets in it, one sheet for every month. And I want to consolidate it all into one nice table. Okay, so from workbook, the file is in here, custom function, headcount data. Okay, so basically I've got 36 sheets with a tiny little table in each one. The table's just got the date and the store number. Here we go, here's all the sheets. This is an Excel file. And all it is, if I zoom in a little bit, okay, is, here we go. We've got a head count. Here's all our list of stores. Here's the head count for those stores. And that's the month or the period. and each sheet has a different period on it. So I need to pull the data in. I need to tidy it up as it's being pulled in, because that's a terrible layout. Okay, and then consolidate it all and stack it into one big data set. So I'm going to start by not doing this. This is where I see people getting stuck. They go select multiple items and they tick all their sheets. You don't have to do that. Okay. I don't know why, but for whatever reason, Microsoft haven't put a little checkbox next to this folder, but you can right click on it and say transform, and that actually goes into the file. They hide this stuff away. Okay. So you don't need to do that at all. You just go right click, transform, because that folder is essentially the file. Okay. So here we go. We're going into this file, but it's treating it like we'll be able to see all the contents of that file. So here we have it. We have all the different sheets, and this little table allows me to drill down into that sheet, that little table function. What I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this, and I'll explain why in a minute. So I'll duplicate that. This, I just want to remove everything else. This is just my, will be my final consolidation. Oh, need to be able to spell properly. Okay, and I Control-Shift+. There we go. Okay, so this is my consolidation. This one here is going to be my cleanup. Right. So what I'm going to do is clean up one sheet, and then I turn it into a little function that can run against every sheet and clean them all up. So here we go. We click on sheet 36, for example. I click on the table. I've now drilled down into sheet 36. So the first thing I want to do is get this date down against every single row. I want to copy it down here because I want to get rid of the stuff at the top, and I just want to have a date against every transaction or every head count. So I am going to add a conditional column. Okay, so you go add conditional column. And basically I'm going to say, if the headcount report is period start, then give me the date. So if the column called headcount report equals period start, then give me the column called column 2. Otherwise, and I'll just leave this else blank. Okay, so I've now got a column with that in, and I can now fill that down. So right click, fill down. It's now spilled the date down. Yeah. Now this is my store code column. This is my head count. There's different ways of doing this. Okay. I'm doing this for demo purposes. Head count. And this is my date. I'm just going to filter everything out that doesn't begin with ST. Just makes it simple. So text filters begins with, type in an ST here. Okay. Now that's not the safest approach. Don't recommend doing it that way. Come up with some other that's a nice simple one for demo purposes. Okay. So this is going to be whole numbers. Hopefully never have anything less than a whole head count. And then this is going to be a date. So there's my little routine, right? Every single sheet, I want to do those steps to. So to do that, what I need to do is turn this into a function. Now there's one thing you have to do to turn a little query into a function. You have to add something called a parameter. Now what that means is this navigation step is referring to sheet 36. That's hard coded in. That's not good. I want to be able to pass the sheet name in to run this code against each sheet name. So I'm going to replace sheet 36 with a parameter. So here we go. We go to home. We click on manage parameters. And we're going to create a new one called, I don't know, my sheet name, for example. It's going to be a piece of text. And the current value is sheet 36. And you click OK. I've just created a parameter. There it is. Okay, nothing fancy. But then I go to my cleanup. I go to my navigation step, and I replace this sheet 36 with my, there goes, my sheet name. And then I click the tick or press enter. Nothing will happen because my sheet name is sheet 36, same thing. But now I can right click on here on cleanup, and can create a function from it. Create a function. The function is going to be called fn cleanup. I tend to put fn at the start of my functions and click OK. And now it'll turn it magically, this little helper folder, very similar to consolidating files from a folder. Okay, so now I can go to my consolidation. I can say add a column, a really friendly named invoke custom function. I don't name these things, right? It's a bit of sarcasm coming in there. Right, invoke custom function. What function? My cleanup function. Where do I get the names that I need for my function? Well, they're from that name column. There you go, there's only one column. And I click OK. So the function runs down, grabs sheet 36, cleans it up. Runs down, grabs sheet 35, cleans it up. Sheet 34, and so on and so on. And then all I have to do is expand this out and say, I don't want to use the original column name. Give it a few seconds. It's normally pretty instant. All right, click OK. And now it will just blow out every sheet and show me all the stores and all the dates for all the sheets. And there's my data from all my sheets, beautifully consolidated. And then I can go home, close and load, load to, load it to a table, load it to my data model, and it's fully refreshable. And every time somebody adds a new sheet into that Excel file, I just click refresh. This refreshes, the report updates. And that's adding a little custom function, okay? So the key thing, create a little function, create a little routine, a query, a normal query, and then you've got to work out what the parameter needs to be. And in this case, it's the sheet name. So I create a parameter via home, manage parameters, okay, new parameter, that's how I create it. And once you've created it, you then right click on the query and you say create function, and then it turns it into this. And then when you go to wherever you got your list of items or names or things you want to clear up, and you just say add column, invoke custom function, and it'll run all the way down and do all the things it needs to do. So there you go. Hopefully that is helpful. Hopefully there's a few new tips and tricks in there. I will put in a little link. Let me chuck this link into the chat as well. So let me copy this and see if I can put it over here. Okay, so there's a little folder. Hopefully that's gone in. Hold on, let me change it to everyone and see if I can actually send that. There we go. Hopefully that's in there. So there's a little link to a SharePoint folder. If it doesn't work, I'll get one working on the LinkedIn, on the Meetup site with Alan. It contains an example of what I've just done and a few tips about connecting to SharePoint. And to wrap up for me, if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn and stuff, just do a search for Win Hopkins on Google. But just be aware, there is a male model and actor called Win Hopkins as well. Different person. Okay. So hope that was useful. And then happy to answer any other questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Win.
No worries.
Just copying your link ready for the kind of post-meetup email that we do. So I'll put it in that.
Hopefully it works. I had a few issues with my sharing my links today, so hopefully it's okay.
I haven't tried that. Yeah. I don't know if you can see the chat. There's lots of thanks coming in.
Well, good. Thank you, everybody.
Was there any questions?
There was one from Jess. My impression from trying to do this before is it's easier to consolidate individual files than sheets. Yes, totally correct. And easier to edit afterwards. Yeah. The way to consolidate sheets, it depends, okay? It depends. If the sheets need some sort of tidying up, if there's data that needs tidying up in there, then yeah, it's a bit harder. I had really messy layout there. So sometimes it's just as simple as clicking the expand button and it just works nicely. Other times you've got to write a little function. Anything else from anyone?
There's
a lot to take in.
Yeah, it's a few, and they're all kind of surrounded by
awesome.
That's the one. We've got Aziz is asking for a reminder as to why you created the reference earlier.
Oh, when I did the from SharePoint.
I think that's probably.
Oh, sorry, back up here. Sorry, when within this. Right, let me go back. That's a good question. So I probably didn't actually even save it, did I? So so there was. I should have saved it and loaded it. So one of the steps was I connected to the file. So get data, and I'll even go recent sources because it should be in there, hopefully. Headcount data, there you go, lovely. Okay, so I didn't drill down straight into the first query that got created. So if this was the one that you're referring to. So I didn't drill straight down into this one. Okay. I didn't go straight into table because I knew I was going to need a list of sheet names to run my function against. So I wanted to have one query that had the list of table of sheet names and another query that was my cleanup query. So that's why I duplicated them. To be honest, you only learn that after you do it wrong the first time or the first 5 times. And then you go back and that's one of those sort of, how do you know you're going to do that? Well, you don't. You stuff it up and then you realize you should have added a reference query to start with and you do it again. Life's full of those. We only know because we've stuffed up.
Indeed.
Awesome. What else is there? Difference between parameter versus invoke function. So the function needs to be passed some sort of variable. Like you could have a function that's x plus y equals result, okay? But you need to be able to pass it the parameter x and the parameter y from somewhere. So if you run a function, it'll ask you, where are you going to get parameter x from? Where are you going to get parameter y from to do the calculation? So that's the parameters, the inputs the function needs to run. And yeah, invoking the custom function just makes it basically fill down the entire column, running on every row of the column. And then it grabs the parameter from whatever column, whichever row item from those columns you selected. Do references execute the same query multiple times, or does it load a single time and do multiple operations on the same data? Oh, good question. So yeah, let's say you have query A go into the data source and then query B pulls from query A. Logically, you would hope that query A pulls the data and then query B doesn't have to go to the data source again, but they will both run. It'll force it to run twice. It's just the way Power Query works. You'll actually end up running the query twice, potentially. Depends on what it, again, it's one of those depends things, but often you'll find that like you have one master query and 2 queries coming off it. If you go back to the source system and you run a trace on it, you'll actually find it running 3 times. There's potential ways of handling it to some extent, but I haven't come across any great way of doing it. Formula firewall issues. Oh, sorry, anywhere do we reference execute? Okay, formula firewall. So for those of you who haven't come across Power Query's joy of formula firewalls, under, where is it? Under here, or let's go back at the easiest place. It is up here somewhere. I never remember where it is. Okay, so under get data, sorry, click over here, get data, query options. Okay. Generally, what I end up doing is turning off these privacy settings. Okay, always ignore. But you notice here, I didn't have any privacy settings turned off, so that worked fine. So that's not causing any issues. To be honest, your queries will run faster if you turn off always ignore privacy level settings. It's a topic for another time. And also the data load, this thing can have a massive difference, okay? You may want to turn that off. The downside of turning that off is that you just get these little warning boxes pop up everywhere, and they're quite misleading because there's nothing wrong. It's just the previews haven't loaded, and you're getting warnings that the previews haven't loaded. But that can make a massive difference in how quickly your queries refresh, especially when you've got queries feeding off other queries. Oops. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think so. Oh, but shoot, one question.
Feel free to unmute and shout out as well if you've got anything to ask. But
yeah, sometimes easier than us looking through chat.
If I've missed anybody's question, please shout out because I'm scrolling up and down.
So, Guy,
I just asked a question.
it says, well done.
Nice.
I was going to ask whether you normally spend much time with the advanced editor and how you get on with it.
Or now and again, yeah. But to be honest, I managed to avoid it most of the time. But the advanced editor is a bit of a beast. Everything looks really ugly in there as well. So within this advanced editor, let me go a better example than that one. So let's like this consolidation one. So the advanced editor, all these steps down the side, every single step is an individual row in the advanced editor. It's better now, there's IntelliSense. The fact that if you've got a space between your step name, it puts double quotes and a hash symbol in there. And every step refers to the previous step. And that previous step will have hash and double quotes in there, makes the code look really ugly. But yeah, now and again, I jump in there.
I was going to follow up with that with if you use it a lot, do you redefine your variable names to tell you what you've got rather than a very clunky description of what you did to get it?
So down here, I would thoroughly advise, and I recommend this to everybody, is that you rename these steps. Okay, so if you've done something like, extracted text before delimiter, well, that's not really helpful. So you can rename these steps, or just click the wrong button. But also, as well as renaming the steps, the key thing to do is say why you did it. So this would be like, extract dep from file name as a starting point. That's more helpful. Okay, and then if it's not obvious why you did something, especially when you apply filters and things like this, you right click and you go to properties and you put in the why I did this.
Oh, wow, that's a new trick on me.
Your future self will thank you greatly, okay? Because you will come back to this file in a month's time and go, why did I filter that out? What was I thinking? Why did I have to extract the first two characters? Or why did I exclude account G57? Why I did this. And thanks to user voice, okay, if you click OK, we voted on user voice, we got a load of people to vote, and it actually added did I not save that? Oh, it's not come through on this version of Excel. At least it stopped. It used to add, or does add, in the latest version of Excel, a little I symbol to tell you there's more information as well. Whereas up until recently, until it started doing that, I always used to advise people to put a little I at the start to tell you that there was some extra information underneath. But in the latest release of Excel and stuff, that I pops up automatically as soon as you put some properties in there. Yes, document your code. You will thank yourselves.
Again, are those the pattern is that every line refers to the one before? Does it have to? Can you refer to several lines before or multiple lines?
You can refer to, a query can refer to itself. You can do all sort of nested looping and stuff. It's crazy. You can do all sorts of stuff. You get yourself in a bit of a pickle, but you can. You can sort of like, you can create a query that says, right, give me you could come in here and say, right, I could filter this down just to one row, work out the maximum in that row, and then use it later on, 7 steps down, whatever that maximum figure was. I could reference that step. So every step is essentially a standalone little table or cell. So yeah, you can do all sorts of referencing back and forth. And the real crazy thing with Power Query is it doesn't necessarily run in the order you say. It will do the steps you need to do in the order you do them. But if it can work out a more efficient way of running them, it'll mash it up and do it in a different order when it goes back to the data source. It's pretty insane.
So it is just navigating a tree, and it will decide the order as long as it's a valid order.
Yeah. And you can even go here, view, and say query dependencies. And you get a nice little tree showing you what feeds what. So you can go left to right, and then I can say, right, this feeds, or this consolidation comes from these files, and that comes from these ones, and you can just see the chain in here.
How did you get that bunny out of the hat?
So that is up here under View tab, Query Dependencies. So when you've got one query feeding off another one, it's pretty nice way of it needs improvement again, as lots of things in Excel do, but it's certainly helpful to help you navigate these sorts of things, especially if you're debugging somebody else's file, because you inherit it and you go, what feeds off what? How do I work out where all these chains are? And then that can be really awesome.
Thanks.
I have a question, Win.
Yeah.
For the last example that you showed with multiple sheets, if you modified the query, adding a column, for example, this is directly connected to the function, and the entire result modifies, right?
Yeah. So if let's say, let's say every sheet we needed another column brought in.
Yep.
So we had that date column, and we had the head count, and let's say there was, I don't know, sales.
If you want the end of the month, for example, for all of them.
My helper file. Oh, sorry, say that again.
If you want the end of the month, for example, on the
if I wanted to change it to the end of the month because it was bringing in the start of the month.
Adding a column with the end of the month.
Yeah.
If you modify it in the query, you should get the column in the consolidated result, right?
Yeah, so my query is directly linked. That's a very good point. My query is linked to that function I created. So any change I make to that cleanup query, any tweaks I make to that, they automatically get linked to that function. And therefore that function, when it applies to every sheet, that will add the column. So yeah, that's a good point. I should have mentioned that. Just the same as this one that gets built for you. Any change you make to this transform sample file gets turned into this function. This is the function for the transform sample file. Mm-hmm. And essentially, for those of you into the advanced editor side of things, it's the same query, but never edit it because then it breaks the link between the two. But if I'll just go into here just to show you. So the transform file is virtually the same, except it's got this source equals parameter 1, which is essentially the file name. Whereas, and the code in the sample file is exactly the same. So the code in here is exactly the same, except it hasn't got that little brackety bit at the top. It's the same code, but they link to each other. But as soon as you try and make a manual change to the function, then the link breaks, and they're both independent of each other then, which is a shame. But no, it's a good question.
Any other questions, guys?
I have one more.
Go on, Christian.
Does any of you found a good connector for Excel files stored in box.com? We are using a lot box.com, and I tried in several ways to do it, and in the end I just synchronized the offline folders on my PC from Box to OneDrive and getting the data from there, because I couldn't find a good connector yet. I was hoping that any of you found a good connector. I don't know, a custom made or something like this.
If I hear about one, I'll let you know.
Well, thank you very much.
I haven't come across one. Imka may have done something on that. Might check out her blog.
I did.
She did one on Dropbox, but I don't know about box.com.
Can I say something about that? Good morning, this is Celia. Thank you, Wayne, for
Celia.
great presentation.
Hi, Celia.
I don't know. I never used Box. I use Dropbox a lot. I'm not sure if Box works very similar to Dropbox or not. What I do is I use that snippet code that goes Excel current workbook, and then we refer to a path, not to a path, to a named range, which is a cell. And in that cell, I have an Excel formula to extract the path of that current file. And then I work with relative paths. If I need to refer to different folders, different files in my folders system in Dropbox, I make sure to have different cells, as many as I need, to work out the path to those folders. So let's say, to make this simple, let's say I need to connect to two different files, and those files are in the same folder as the Excel file where I have my queries. So I have an Excel formula that extracts the path to my main Excel file where the queries are, and with the cell formula, and then I have other cells that tell me, okay, this other file is the same path concatenated with whatever I need to find that specific thing. And then I use parameters or different queries in Power Query to find those little pieces of information and make them work inside the queries. What that does is that the other Dropbox user on the other end of the world, if needed, when they open the file, that Excel formula makes the path coincide with their shared folder, the path to that shared folder. And then so the queries will run exactly the same on their end. What that sometimes needs to be done is that data privacy. Every time a different user opens the file, if you need that data privacy turned off for performance purposes, every time someone else different uses the file, they need to tweak that setting. But that doesn't collide with having the folders working properly. If you need, Christian, if you need that formula, I can find you some videos with that explained.
I think Monkey Tools from Ken already has it, and he has something like this. But
yeah, I don't know if that works well with, I don't know how well the Box.com synchronizes offline files, if it is as good as Dropbox, or if it is similar. This could be
it's a little bit different, but for now I was just synchronizing the offline folders, and this is it.
The other issue I found on a similar topic is if you're referring to a personal OneDrive folder and you lose your internet connection, it switches from the online folder to the local folder. So it automatically does that. So if you coded in the online folder as your reference for the query, it doesn't work because you're not online anymore. So using the this workbook path effectively by referring to, like Shelley was saying, with a cell and the path, and referring to that as a named range, that fixes that problem as well.
I've tried with, hi Faraz here. How are you all?
Hello Faraz, buddy.
Faraz.
Good. Actually, I tried with OneDrive, just creating that download link when you just click on the share download file, that path when you use it. But I have observed that that path remains only for active for 24 hours. After that, if you try to refresh the query, it breaks. And I see when also, he has a nice blog on that. I tried it with that way also, connecting it with the OneDrive, where you just switch and mention it just as downloads, then it works, But I still face a problem after 24 hours, that link gets expires and then you need to paste the new link over there.
So is that that OneDrive personal then for us?
Yeah, personal. I'm talking about
that's
the personal.
Yeah, that's the thing. The link expires, isn't it? That's the hassle.
Yeah. But what about the business? It remains for a longer time?
Yeah, essentially, you go via the SharePoint folder or from web, and that link is permanent.
Okay. That's cool.
So it's essentially OneDrive for business is essentially SharePoint, and then it's your personal SharePoint site. So it just sticks there. So you use that path, it works.
Okay. Thanks.
No worries. Somebody mentioned about is there any decent third-party tools for making the M language easier?
Yeah.
So not really making the M language easier, but there is Ken Pulse's Monkey Tools that you might want to check out if you want to sort of automate some of these processes. That's probably the one that I'm aware of. Monkey Tools. Ken owes me $5.
It's really good. That one, it's really good.
Excellent.
Good luck in trying to get it from him.
I know. Yeah. What's the Canadian dollar exchange rate now? I don't know.
You might get a beer.
Maybe. Awesome. Any other questions from anybody?
Lots of thank yous.
Feel free to ask if anybody's got a question.
Yeah, Win, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Nothing to do with the Power Query, more of a data modeling or Power Pivot question.
Oh, yeah.
Have you done much with many-to-many relationships? I know they've just put in the ability to do many-to-many in Power BI, but it's not come through to Excel.
No, I just avoid them like the plague.
Oh, no. They're a nightmare.
Yeah. So, first option, create a bridging table so you don't have to have a many-to-many. So but then I did have one client where there were like multiple trucks with multiple products and multiple products on multiple trucks. And it was like, you just had to do this relationship. If it's in a real small 2 or 3 table model and you can get your head around it, as soon as it starts to expand out of that, then it's just spin the old roulette wheel. And
the thing I'm trying to do, a bridging table doesn't work because it filters only in one direction away from the filtering from the bridging table.
Oh, okay.
What it is I've got historical transaction data as a fact table, and then I've really got another lookup table, which is a fact table as well, if that makes sense, which is my product pricing. But the product pricing it's changeable. So at a certain date, the pricing will change for that particular product. And so what I want to do is feed back into the transactions table the price of the product at that point in time when the transaction was made.
Oh, okay.
Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's a really easy logical way of doing it. It's just my brain can't think of it.
It's what is it? 9:30 at night. You're chucking many-to-many DAX questions at me.
But the easy way of doing it is just with a VLOOKUP with an approximate.
Yeah. So there's the options merges in Power Query to combine the tables before load. Use the cross filter function in DAX. Use lookup value in DAX. There's those sorts of and disable filters and switch filters on and off between certain tables rather than doing the many-to-many. But yeah, that's a delve in for a good old dig around in conversation. Awesome.
Right, I must go now. Great to see you. Thanks very, very much for that presentation.
Cheers, Roger. Thank you, everybody.
Enjoyed it.
Thanks for taking the time. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Cheers, Roger.
Yes, Roger.
Thank you. Cheers, folks. Okay, if there's anything else from anyone, otherwise we'll wrap it up.
I'm going to go as well. Win, that was brilliant. Thank you very much. Alan,
cheers, Paula.
Thank you very much.
No worries. Thanks, folks.
Bye.
Mind you, I wondered where Win's accent has gone. You said the Mumbles. That doesn't sound like the Mumbles to me.
Yeah, that's the posh part of Swansea. That is. I almost got in a fight in Swansea once for not sounding local enough. So yeah, I've obviously.
Well, you don't sound local at all. You sound like pass you off as English, shouldn't they?
It's a bit random. Yeah, it's a bit weird.
Mind you, given you're in Perth, you really haven't picked up any local colour there either, have you?
Nah, not too much. I think if I chat to my friends, they'd probably say I picked up the odd word here and there, but nah, it's all Queen's best Welsh. All right, folks. Well, I'm going to sign off then in that case. And lovely to see you all. Thank you for your attention and your kind words. And we'll catch you some other time.
Yeah, great presentation.
Thank you, Alan, for organising. Thank you.
No worries. Thanks, Win.
Yes, for that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
folks.
Bye. Bye-bye.
See you later.
You
Bye.
guys.
Bye.
Have a good day. Bye-bye. Or a good night.
It's there. You all right, Taya?
Yeah, all good. I will be ending the meeting now.
Bye.
Now talk to you soon, Alan.
Will do. Cheers, bud.
Bye. Bye.